The origins of jazz are not without controversy. As with many cultural phenomena, the development of jazz was shaped by various social, political, and racial dynamics, leading to differing opinions and debates regarding its true origins. One of the most contentious debates surrounding the origins of jazz is whether it represents cultural appropriation or cultural fusion. Some argue that jazz was appropriated by white musicians and audiences who profited from a genre deeply rooted in African American culture. This perspective highlights the exploitation of black musicians, who often received little recognition or financial compensation for their contributions. On the other hand, many view jazz as a quintessential example of cultural fusion. Jazz emerged from a diverse mix of musical traditions, including African, European, and Caribbean influences. This fusion created a new, vibrant form of expression that transcended racial and cultural boundaries. Jazz is more than just a genre. It's a cultural movement that has deeply influenced the world of music and beyond. Emerging in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, jazz is a musical style known for its complex rhythms, improvisation, and blending of different musical traditions. But where did jazz come from? New Orleans, Louisiana, is widely recognized as the birthplace of jazz. The city's unique cultural melting pot, combining African, Caribbean, European, and Creole influences, provided the perfect environment for the development of jazz. In the early 1900s, New Orleans was bustling with brass bands, street performances, and dance halls where jazz was beginning to take shape. Some scholars believe one of the key components of jazz is its African roots. The rhythmic complexity and call and response patterns found in jazz can be traced back to African musical traditions. Enslaved Africans may have brought these elements to America, where they blended with European musical forms to create something entirely new. African American spirituals and work songs laid the foundation for jazz. These forms of music, which often reflected the struggles and hopes of Black Americans, incorporated elements of rhythm and improvisation that would later become central to jazz. The blues is another crucial influence on jazz. Originating in the African American communities of the Deep South, the blues provided the emotional depth and expressive quality that would become a hallmark of jazz music. The 12-bar blues structure became a standard form in jazz, allowing for both improvisation and emotional expression. One of the earliest figures in jazz history is Buddy Bolden, a cornet player from New Orleans. Often credited as the first jazz musician, Bolden was known for his powerful sound and innovative style. His band, which performed in the late 1800s and early 1900s, played a significant role in laying the groundwork for jazz. The popularity of the new jazz culture had positive and negative consequences within American society in the 1920s. The evolution of jazz music elevated aspects of African American culture for the first time in the history of the United States. The culture of a minority became the desire of the majority. Although jazz aided in the elevation of the status of African Americans, there was a very serious white backlash to this success. Some white musicians denied that jazz was African American by origin, instead choosing to label the original Dixieland Jazz Band as the genesis of jazz music. Although many classical musicians believed that jazz was not to be evaluated on the same level as Puccini or Chopin, Jazz music did receive a certain amount of respect from literary figures and classical musicians. From the wild beat to the crazy improvisation, jazz music intrigued many people from higher echelons in American society. With the elevation of this distinctly African-American art form came a respect and dignity that African Americans had often been deprived of. As the racial conflict between white and black mounted during the early years of the 1920s, radical Negro movements both in the North and the South grew rapidly. These groups began to gather power, eloquent representatives, and sympathetic supporters. Across the country, race riots and strikes by African American workers inflamed the rage of white supremacist groups throughout the country. A series of new laws made New Orleans a very difficult place for any African American to prosper. The new laws restricted African Americans and sent many fleeing to the North. With the increased respectability, African Americans began to seriously protest the unjust treatment that they received. In this way, jazz also aided in the first steps toward equal rights for African Americans. In the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan grew to over 4 million members. Enraged by the demand for fair wages and the popularity of African American jazz music with white youths, the Klan decided to go on a nationwide campaign to Americanize Americans. In an article printed in the North American Review in March of 1926, the Klan's imperial wizard, Hiram Wesley Evans, stated, "We will not permit him, the Negro, to gain sufficient power to control our civilization. Neither will we delude him with promises of social equality which we know can never be realized." The Klan's movement railed against the urban popular culture, Jews, immigrants, Catholics, and various other groups and associations. By going on a nationwide tirade about the evils of Catholicism and popular culture, the Klan managed to alienate a large percentage of people that may have shared their views of white supremacy. By expanding the scope of their vision, the Klan planted the seeds of its demise and became relatively dormant until the controversy of equal rights reached its peak in the 1960s. The absorption of African American jazz music and culture into society in the 1920s exacerbated the growing racial tensions in the post-World War I period, but it also paved the way for the equal rights movement in the 1960s. Jazz was different because it broke the rules, musical and social. It featured improvisation over traditional structure, performer over composer, and Black American experience over conventional white sensibilities. Undercurrents of racism bore strongly upon the opposition to jazz, which was seen as barbaric and immoral. Before jazz emerged, many music educators, worried that jazz would destroy young people's interest in classical music, tried to convince the public that European classical music was the only good music. This is James from One Track Jazz. Thanks for listening. Part 2 will be available soon, so don't forget to like and subscribe.